Alright y'all, thanks for checking out this stitching sampler of Little Bacteria. So I'm going to show you how to do a few more stitches than my other tutorials would show you a satin stitch or a back stitch. So these are the colors that I'm going to be using. All of these are DMC brand embroidery floss, which has 6 ply or 6 threads. This means that one strand of this embroidery floss is actually made up of 6 individual strands, like I'm showing you here. And so we're going to be splitting some strands for this sampler. That's something that I do pretty often in the work that I do so far. So I'm going to continue kind of doing things that way. And yeah, let's get started. I'm going to start by stitching the cell body of this one right here in the middle with this kind of pinkish red floss. So I'm just going to take out a little bit. I don't ever really work with more than 12 inches of floss at a time, otherwise I find that it gets really tangled. I'll snip. Okay, so now I'm going to separate it into 3 individual strands of floss. So you can see here how it's the full 6. I'm just going to find 3 like this and just split it and slowly pull and split. Woo, all right. And then I'm going to untangle that like that. So with the thread that I am going to use, I'm going to go ahead and tie just a normal knot wherever that's going to lie. And essentially I'll just cut off the fringe from that knot and I'll save it for scrap projects for later. So just a normal knot. And since this is 3 strands, I'm only going to tie 1 knot. If it were more or less than 3 strands, like 2 or 1 strand, I would tie at least a double knot. So just 1 knot this time. Okay, so now I'm going to thread my needle. And there are a bunch of ways to do that. My favorite way is just the poke and hope for the best way. So I'm going to take one of my needles off my needle magnet here. This is very hard to do on camera, by the way. And so I'm just going to find the eye of the needle. And there we go. Looks like I got the best this time. The first stitch I'm going to teach you is called split stitch. So this is actually an odd number of threads. So technically if you were really doing a real split stitch, you would have to split between 1 strand of thread and a half, but I'm just going to do kind of a modified split stitch. And essentially, it sort of works like a back stitch, but people really like to use this stitch as an outlining stitch. So I'm going to start with an outline, but I am going to fill in the whole cell body with this stitch. So essentially, you lay your first stitch just normally, like a straight stitch. And then when you go to do your second stitch, you come up through the middle, or you split that first stitch like this. So I'm trying to get it kind of really in between the stitch like this. So I'm coming up in the middle of this stitch. And then I'll lay my next stitch. So for my next stitch, I'm going to come back up and split it again. So here we're going to come up, split the stitch, see where I'm at, split the stitch. Sometimes this ends up looking kind of like a little mini chain stitch, but it's not. It is different. So... and if you have an even number of like threads in your floss, it's going to look a little bit cleaner. But I really like working with the 3 ply. So I'm just going to keep going and keep splitting. So see, I'm split. You can see it makes a really nice texture. I really like it. I really like what it looks like. I really like how it looks when you fill in the entire shape. Go slowly while you do this. I have to hold the hoop up to my face pretty close sometimes just to see that I'm really splitting the stitch. All right, so let me zoom in and fill in this entire area while you watch me do a split stitch. Okay, let me pause the time lapse for a second and show you a few things that I did that are kind of quirky. So first off, I'm going to take the hoop off my stand. Sorry for the wiggly camera. It's like a gooseneck holder, so every time I bump it, it's going to wiggle. But okay, so you can see like right here is a space, right, in between these two stitches. So this is because I didn't make the stitches small enough to put next to each other in order to fill in that space really well. You can also see that when stitches are larger, you can tell where you're splitting more prominently than when the stitches are smaller. And as always, with kind of any embroidery, you want to make your stitches smaller as you're going around curves. That's going to make your curves look a lot cleaner. All right, so let me also show you the back of the hoop. So this is what the back of the hoop looks like. It is very basic, and I'm just going to tie in my ends here by sticking the needle under a group of stitches, pulling through. I'm going to stick it under that same group one more time. And then in this little circle here, I'm going to stick my needle to tie a little knot. So you can see it's going to tie a little knot, pull, not too tight, but pull, and I'm going to cut this loose thread. And then I'm going to fill in the rest of the body. So I'm going to do that through a time lapse so you don't get bored of watching me do split stitch, but hopefully you get the gist of it. Here is what the finished product looks like, and that is a split stitch. So you can see I made the stitches a lot smaller around the curves, and then in this part where I filled it in, I just kind of like followed around the multiple curves and then just like filled in wherever it needed filling in. It doesn't need to be perfect, but I really like the texture. Cool, so that's split stitch.